In today's world of throwaway tools and throwaway products, this is a skill that's not many people have anymore. It's not a difficult thing to do, but something that was commonplace in days of old. It's very difficult anymore to find an axe of any quality, or a hatchet, or a mallet. Most of what you're going to find in your hardware stores are going to be true temper, made in Brazil, Mexico, Chinese forged, garbage steel. It doesn't hold an edge good. It's not tempered very correctly. It's essentially a bunch of recycled material dumped into a cauldron, melted down, and poured in the form of an axe. I've even seen some so far as to be the blemishes and the pits to be filled in with Bondo and painted over. One thing I like to do is hit garage sales and find old axes. And that's a sample of what you have here today. You'll notice them that they'll usually have USA markings. Anything you find USA, German, or Swedish stamped into it is typically going to be good steel. So don't worry about the handle. Don't worry if it's all rusty. One thing you want to look for, does it have a clean edge? In other words, are there chips that can't be filed out? If it has a good solid edge, even if it's not overly sharp, that's okay. I'll show you how to fix that. But as long as everything is in good shape, you have a decent edge, and no cracks or anything obviously wrong with it, you have the makings of a fine tool that you will not be able to replace easily. So to handle an axe, we're going to need a few tools I've got laid out. We're going to need some 180 grit sandpaper. Of course, the axe that you are going to handle. We're going to need some standard premium wood glue. Metal wedges, 2. Wood wedge, 1. A few basic hand tools, a hammer, a punch, a Sharpie, a saw of some sort. I'll be using a Sawzall, and some boiled linseed oil. So let's get to it. The axe I'm going to handle today is my prized wood splitting axe. As you can see, the handle has started to recess and work loose. This is a very dangerous situation. This could break off in mid-swing, and more than one logger and woodworker has been seriously injured or killed with this situation here. So the first thing we're going to do is to cut off the old handle. With a large punch, drive the remaining handle out the bottom of the axe head. It's larger than the top. Once you get the handle out, don't forget which is the top of the axe, because the openings are different sizes. Take a center punch on the top of it and mark it. That way you'll know where the top is. And with the piece of handle you just removed from there, don't forget to take these metal wedges out. You'll be needing these. Now that your axe head is removed, take it to a reputable hardware store and go ahead and fit the handle. When buying a handle, you want hickory or ash, and don't buy anything that has varnish on it. Any manufacturer that would varnish a handle doesn't know much about handles, and stay away from it. It'll give you blisters and it's not correct. So hickory or ash, and make sure that it's this white, bright white color. If it has a lot of granulation in it, knots or colors, avoid it. What you want is this pure white color. And inserting it from the bottom, the fit, you should not be able to push it down more than about an inch. It should start to widen. We'll have to custom fit this to this particular head, and I'll show you how to do that. With the new handle secured in the vise, it's time to fit the head. Inserting it from the bottom, slide it on, and work it back and forth. Remove it. What you're going to see are your points of contact. Right here, the shiny points, where the axe head was no longer able to go forward, we're going to start removing that material. We want it to slip all the way up to this taper. When removing the excess material to fit this head, I recommend using a fine wood rasp or sandpaper. Unless you are really skilled with a tool like this pneumatic roll lock, you can take off too much material and ruin your head. So be careful when using power tools. Start slowly working until and removing material on those polished edges. I'm getting close now. Take a Sharpie and trace this down where it really starts to widen right here, and make a mark. That's your goal. You can see these polish points are rub marks from the axe head. A little bit more material needs to be removed here for a perfect fit. Once you have enough material removed, take your axe and your handle and seat it firmly on the ground. It should be looking something like this. We see our taper coming up right here. We have the axe head seated firmly on the handle. Now it's the time to finish it up. A proper axe handle is going to come with its own wooden wedge. And a proper axe handle is also going to have what we call a kerf cut in here, which is basically a cut that splits the two pieces. What we're going to do is we're going to place this in here, make sure that it fits. It's not too wide. If it is, we need to trim it down. Once we determine that, we're going to put a little bit of wood glue on here and seat it in. Just glue the bottom half. Don't get the glue up on the top. It'll just make a mess. Spread it around on both sides. Center your wedge. You can just use your old axe handle for this and seat the wedge. Once the wedge is seated, take a sawzall with a fine tooth or a fine tooth handsaw and cut it off, leaving about 3/16 to 1/8 of an inch above the axe head. Once you get this cut off, take your sandpaper and sand this down. If this thing, some people say cut that flush, but I like to leave it up. Even if it just sticks up a 1/16 or 1/8 of an inch, that's not going to hurt a thing. If you look at axes that come from the famous Swedish axe maker Grundfors Brooks, you can see that from the factory they come sticking up a good 1/8 to 3/16. So who am I to argue with success? To install the metal wedges. On smaller axes like the small forest axe, one wedge will be sufficient, and you can see that they drove that in at an angle, and that is so it didn't get too far to the edges. You wanted to leave a little bit of material around there, and that's fine if you're using the large wedges. If you're going to use the small wedges, you can drive them in at a 90-degree angle to the wedge, just like I'll do here. And when you pound this in, don't worry if it splits a few times or breaks. The glue will help hold it, and it's just kind of the way it goes. It's not going to hurt a thing. Now it's time to put the wedges in. With your axe head just floating loosely on here, don't clamp around the handle because the shock is going to mar the new handle. But just have it resting in there. We're going to put 2 wedges in, and we're going to go with the I'm going to go with the smaller ones right here, and about 1/3 of the way in. And what I do is I'll set it, and then check and see, make sure I'm centered right on the wood wedge, and once that's done, I'll drive it in. Once it gets flush, take a punch and drive it down just a little bit under the wood. This method of securing wooden handles to metal tools has been used for probably 200 years, and it's the best we have. No one has been able to improve upon it. If you could figure out a way to secure a wooden handle to a metal tool that was more reliable than this, you'd be a rich man. It's kind of always been the holy grail of blacksmiths and tool makers. So we'll move this in just a little bit. We don't want to get too close to this narrow area where we're going to split the outer wood, so right up here a little bit, we'll seat it. Make sure it's centered and drive it in. There you have it. Don't buy into epoxies, you'll see that, or glues. They just won't hold up. The shock and the force that this takes, there needs to be a little bit of movement. The epoxies will just break out after a time. The only tried and true way to do this is with a double wedge. We're pressing this way and we're pressing this way. And if you do it like I showed you, this will last for a long, long time. Alright, using our vise and clamping the handle in it is going to have left some small scratches and marks, maybe some grease. And we're going to use 180 grit sandpaper, and we're going to prep this handle for a boiled linseed oil finish. So just take your sandpaper and work the full length of the handle, and just work out any of those little small depressions or grease marks or dirt or grease. Once you get your handle all finished down with the 180 grit, you don't need to go any smoother than that. With use and handling it, it'll smooth up very nicely. But we have the raw untreated wood of our new handle. Now we want to treat it. And the best thing to use, and this goes for all the handles on any of your tools, whether it be shovels or picks or axes, is boiled linseed oil. Don't use regular linseed oil, but make sure it's boiled. And I don't recommend putting it on a rag. Just get some of these rubber gloves and dip your finger in it and apply it with your hands. When you use a rag, most of it is just wasted on the rag, and it's kind of expensive, this boiled linseed oil. And coat this really good. About 15 minutes between coats, and apply it about 3 times. And don't forget, up here on the top of the head, use a generous amount in there. This will protect the wood, this will give it nourishment, keep it moist, and not only waterproof it, but keep it from splitting, and we'll just, over time, we'll just give it a really nice brown luster that's nice to handle, as you can see from this axe, with many, many coats.